Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 2 o'clock, time for the Inverclyde Live-Stream. But first, a little music. Enjoy.
There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. Sugar cane from Jamaica, put a sweet tooth in every mouth, and the cotton that once was spun here fine was gathered by black hands of the South. Factory girls, topped with scarves, made the sugar, spun the bread, and the tough men who made the great ships great were proud to call themselves red. There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. Raw tobacco from Virginia wandered next to ruby wine, moved by dirty puffing steam trains to factories along the line. Good roads from Port Glasgow, cooper barrels for the whiskey trade. All the world knew that the legend claimed the best ships were always Clyde made. There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the weekend. It's a bit chilly and a bit rainy out today. Good afternoon, Sensum. Thank you for being here. So let me give a mention, a deserved mention, to all the volunteers who are out in this rather cold and breezy afternoon picking up litter round the dams at Murderson Street. There are several volunteers using their own time and energy keeping that part of the town clean and tidy. which is much appreciated by all those who use the place. And but I would say in the first place, it would be better if it weren't needed, folks. So anyone who uses the dams is either a shortcut going somewhere or for recreational purposes, whether just to sit there, watch swans, or drink cans of beer, or whatever they're doing. It would be nice and thoughtful if you didn't leave rubbish that needed to be collected. And as we all know, there aren't any litter bins up around that area. So there are people using their own time and energy to keep it as clean and as tidy as possible. And on behalf of myself and the pensioner party, I would say thank you very much for that. But it would be better if people, instead of just willy-nilly throwing stuff away, to hold on to it until they get to a litter bin. And then perhaps we wouldn't need people to volunteer their energy and their time on their day off to do this kind of manual labour. But it is very good of them to do it, so well done the volunteers, whoever they may be. And this goes on in various locations throughout Inverclyde, just in case you hadn't noticed. But as I say, if everyone were just a little bit more thoughtful about the rubbish that they make, this wouldn't be necessary. It's the same along the shores of the river. People tend to just drop things like cans and bottles and papers, and it's completely unnecessary. Again, it's one of these things that long ago was criminalised but never enforced. And it's best if we didn't need it to be criminalised. It would be best if people did it out of a pride in the area, a pride in where they live. There is Inverclyde is essentially a nice landscape and background place to live, but it is made unnecessarily a tipping place, and it is unnecessary. There should be bins, and if their bins are there and they are overflowing with rubbish, then you should report that to the town council. And don't take no for an answer. It is, after all, included in the council tax charges, which are going up by 2%. So we're paying enough through the council tax to have the bins regularly emptied. So if you find bins lying stuffed with rubbish for weeks on end, then you should report it to the council and have them do something about it, so that we don't need to depend on volunteers to do this kind of thing on their time off from work. It's in everyone's interest to keep the place as tidy and as clean as possible. And it doesn't take a lot of effort just to hang on to an empty cigarette packet, put it in your pocket until you reach a litter bin, or an empty bottle or can of beer, or lemonade, or whatever it is. Or carry out food is another one that we see all over the place. These plastic containers from all sorts of American style takeaway joints. In the days before these places arrived, we didn't get that much rubbish from chippies. You still don't get much rubbish. In fact, you don't really see any rubbish outside or around chippies. It's mainly these American fast food joints with their plastic. So I'm asking you to be a bit more thoughtful about the area in which you live. And I'm sure that most people do that. But there's always a minority that just don't care or are just completely thoughtless. And then it's left, as I say, to volunteers to give up their own time and energy to go and pick it all up. So give that a thought when you're out and about and you've got food or drink with you that you're going to eat or drink while you're outside. It doesn't take much just to hang on to it. But my memory tells me that there are no litter bins up and around the dam area. And certainly were none there when I regularly visited on a Saturday night. And it's the same in the cemeteries. There are no litter bins. There should be. And that's the last place you should be. Well, there are big bins, but they're few and far between. But you generally don't get rubbish in cemeteries. It's usually in places like the dams or the seafront. And I couldn't tell you how often these litter bins are emptied. They're more often than not overflowing. I'm sure it's the same all over the country. These services were all cut back years and years and years ago. And they've never been brought back to full strength again. Same as the flooding that we get fairly regularly now in the town. And when I say in the town, I do mean the whole area of Inverclyde. And again, that's simply a question of town councils years ago cut back on the workforce and the specialised lorries that they had for taking all the junk and garbage out of the drainage systems. There is one lorry with a crew of 3 for the whole of Inverclyde that is supposed to keep the drainage empty of rubbish, so that when it does rain, and we know it rains a lot here, it shouldn't flood. If the drains are kept clean and empty of rubbish, then they work perfectly fine. They always have done. But you can't really expect one lorry and a crew of 3 men to have every drain in the Inverclyde area free of rubbish. And it's not rubbish that's collected, that's created by people. It's rubbish such as leaves falling from trees. That's the favourite. They run down the guttering and down into the drain, and eventually they clog it all up. And that's why the mall's continually flooded, because every drain from the West Station, it all runs down into the West Station. The drains at the West Station are completely clogged. All down Inverkip Street are clogged, and so the water just keeps pouring down eventually into the mall, and it gets flooded time and time and time again. Now obviously, if I were being elected as a councillor, this is something that I would personally take up. Now I've questioned the men on duty on that lorry. That's how I can tell you for a fact there is only one lorry. Most of the time they're working overtime, so they're working 7 days a week most of the time. Well, that's not good enough. The area is far too big, and there's too much rain running off the hills. And we all know this. It's something that needs to be improved. It's something that I'm keen to get improved. And the only way to improve it, as far as I can see, is to have at least one other lorry and another crew to man it permanently, so that these hot spots like the bottom of Cloonbrae, the West Station area, Inverkip Street, all running into the mall. Colblain Street's another one. It's part of it all. The rain is all funneled down into that. And history should have taught everyone this, because underneath the pavements, the Westbourne still runs. It's still there. Dellingburn is still there, under Dellingburn Street. Cloonbrae is the same. There's water runs right off the hill, you can see it. It's been like that ever since I can remember. But in the old days, these places weren't flooded. Well, they are now. And that's the reason why they're now flooded, because they're not kept clean and empty. And all that happened years and years and years ago, when councils were all encouraged, all over the land, they were encouraged to cut back on workmen and services. And that needs to be reversed. To some extent, it needs to be changed. One lorry for Inverclyde is not nearly enough. What happens when it breaks down? Lorries break down. Well, that means there is no lorry then. And now, once that is repaired and it's up and running again, now they're on a catch-up. I have a comment here from Sensum. The most annoying thing I find is that the managerial classes love to pontificate about climate and destroying our livelihoods with Green New Deals, and yet when was the last time you saw a Keep Britain Tidy advert? It's a big long comment here. That's right, they no longer care about keeping our country in good order. They've sold our country out anyway. They only care about buzzwords and virtue signalling points. And that is absolutely correct. Now, I have no idea what one of these lorries would cost or how much it costs to keep the three men as full-time employees. No idea. Again, if I were elected a councillor, I would be able to get such information and start to build a case about expanding that to at least 2. Now, for me, that's better money, and that's a better way to spend our tax money than cycle lanes. Now, as I said before to you, I'll remind you again, they have purposely put off a decision about whether these cycle lanes are to be permanent or not till after you have voted them. And once they get back in, I guarantee you, as sure as I'm sitting here, they will be made permanent, and that means all the congestion will be a permanent feature of the town. And I'm sure that all the commuters from as far afield as Inverclyde who have to come up through the town to their jobs are going to love that. I no longer drive, but I am told the commute now through the town is a nightmare at the peak points in the morning going to work, and then in the evening when people are coming back from their work. And if you think about that, folks, places like Eldon Street were purposely built wide so that congestion should not have happened. And it didn't happen before this, because all those folks way back then, at the turn of the century, had enough foresight to build nice wide roads. And then back then it was mainly horse and cart, but at least they had the vision to make the roads wide enough. Sensum. Scotland can't afford any new refuge collection vehicles for Scottish people because all of Scotland's money has been spent on refugees and the conflict in the east. Scots go to the back of the queue. And who could argue with that? Who could argue with that? Now, if you've been in the centre of the town lately, and I'm thinking of people who live way out in Braeside and up on the high hills in Port Glasgow, you may not have seen that the cinema, the BB cinema, as we all knew it as, is being demolished. I am told that, and this is not 100% reliable, but fairly reliable, that in order for the council to spend your money to buy it back again from the private owner, they had to go all the way to Australia, because that's where the owner was. The person who had turned it into a nightclub and then just left it went to Australia. So the council had to track that person down, and God knows how much that cost. Then to buy it back for over £100,000, I am told. Again, I don't have access to these records, which I would if I were a councillor. And I would report these things directly to you, so you know where your money is being spent. Which I think is a disgrace. And somewhere along the line, this property now no longer, it's almost a vacant site. I passed it the other day, it's almost a vacant site. Somewhere along the line, this is going to change back into private hands again. Because you can bet your boots, folks, this is going to be flats, rabbit warren flats. It's going up there. Guaranteed. But somewhere along the line, it'll be sold off at some knockdown price, and someone will make a handsome profit and collect the rents on it. You don't have to be any kind of psychic to work this out. This is what happened with the docks. All the docklands were all put up long before any of us were born, way back in the last century. They were built by public money. We owned all those docks that are now all in private hands. Quietly, were put into private hands that should have remained in our ownership. Just like the maternity hospital and the beautiful grounds that it sat on were gifted to the women of the town in perpetuity. And somehow they got round all of that to sell it all off and close a beautiful maternity hospital to put up what matchbox houses. Somebody made a handsome profit there too, along with across the street. Ravenscraig Hospital, as it latterly became known as. In bygone days, it was a workhouse, and then it became an insane asylum, and then it became a hospital for, well, it was really a care home. It turned really into a care home. And again, on the quiet, it was all sold off. And houses are put on it. And yet, that land is toxic. The houses that are standing there now are standing on toxic ground. This kind of fly-by-night selling of public property has to stop. Having said that, of course, I don't know how much public land is left. There can't be too much of it now. Nothing will change unless you change the political figures that are on the council. They take their orders from higher up. At the moment, there are 6 SNP sitting on the town council, 6 of them. And you can bet your boots that when the education bill comes down for all this new sexual education, as they call it, this deviant transgenderism stuff, they'll be voting for it. They'll be voting to implement it. And they'll be supported by the Greens. And they will take their orders from above. And that's why it's important that you vote for either independent people or you vote for the Pensioners' Party. And at this election, there is only me standing because we are a small party, growing party, but we are a small party with limited funds. I will certainly be against this. And it's coming, it is definitely coming. It may actually be implemented come the new term in August. I'm not quite sure where it is yet in Edinburgh. They've passed it, it's gone through with the support of the Greens. Now I want to remind you folks, in all the years, in all the many years that Labour controlled this council, none of that, nothing like that was ever put into the schools. This has only happened since the SNP took power in Scotland. You have to understand that. This is purely the SNP. And I'm sure you've all heard Nicola Sturgeon herself say, I wish we didn't have the word nationalist in their name. Because she's not a nationalist. She's really a communist, parading around as a nationalist. These are communist ideas, folks. But it's going to take parent power to refuse to accept this. Nothing short of parent power will stop it. And I think Inverclyde should lead the way on this. I will personally be involved in any campaign that arises, whether I'm elected or not. I couldn't have any more stronger feelings against this than I have. And then there is the questionnaire that they've put out. They've either put it out or they're putting it out. I'm not quite sure yet. No consultation to parents. This is going directly to the pupils. Comes into the head teacher's office and then it's into the classrooms. The parents are not involved in it. And the questionnaire is asking pupils in schools about their sex life. Well, if they're under 16, they shouldn't have a sex life. But leaving that aside, that's a completely different issue. These questionnaires are very graphically worded. Again, this is SNP driven. And when you phone up and ask who's responsible, you just get the runaround. And finally, if you can corner somebody down, what they will tell you is, yeah, well, we consulted experts. Well, I would like to know who are experts in such a subject. And why are they asking under 16-year-olds about anal and oral sex, contraception, and many more such lurid questions? But there won't be many parents who'll know that this is going on. Now that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, we have to ask ourselves, you should be asking yourself, why are the teachers going along with this? Why are the teachers not objecting? This is way outside their remit. Way outside. And on top of that, what about the EIS, the biggest teachers union? Where are they in it? I don't hear anything anywhere. We have to take that silence as an agreement to say that this is okay, acceptable, to be asking young people about their sex life when they shouldn't even have a sex life. And as I say, this is only since the SNP took power. What you need to ask yourself if you support SNP is, what has any of this got to do with independence? Nothing is the answer. Absolutely nothing. But they do it on the fly, so you don't know. And I am told by people who have mobile phones, you can get an app for your phone so that whatever's going on in the school where your children are, they can send you a message and tell you. And they have. We're conducting, the pupils are being asked to conduct a survey, but they don't tell the parents what is in the survey, the type of questions, the nature of the questions. Now, on top of all of that, one has to think about, well, what are they going to use all this data for? Where is all this information going to be collected, and by whom? For what purpose? To me, this is completely unacceptable on every single level. And any time I speak to people on the street, they agree, but most of them have never heard of it. And that's the way the SNP have been operating since they took power, and especially since Sturgeon took over. Everything's done on the quiet. Then they bring it in, and then people seem to just collapse and accept it. But they haven't yet brought in the latest round that's coming our way, folks, and I think it may be in the schools by August. But again, I cannot imagine that every single teacher is in agreement. In fact, when I spoke to my pal on Friday night who is a teacher, he tells me they're not in agreement, but they're not being consulted at all. Neither is the union. It's all being implemented straight from Edinburgh, straight from Sturgeon and our cohorts, supported by the Greens, pushed down into the local councils. And at this point, because I am not a councillor, I do not know if councils can refuse to implement what comes from Edinburgh. I need to, well, if I get elected, I will definitely be on top of that as well. But there has to be resistance, ladies and gentlemen. And the best resistance will be the parents and grandparents. As I said, the reaction I get on the street when I bring this subject up, which I do, is quite animated by the people, because most of them haven't heard about it. And they do become very animated when I tell them. So as far as I can see, the SNP don't have any support for any of this stuff. And it's got nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Scottish independence. Which again I find there is no real support for. Sensum is offering a comment. The teachers are scared of the backlash they face because the woke, inverted commas, cancer is now epidemic in every single institution and establishment, especially so in naturally left-leaning education. And that's probably true. However, I can only tell you what my friend who's been in education for over 30 years tells me. And privately in staff rooms and in bases, teacher bases, there's a lot of mumbling and complaining about it. But there is no leadership in the EIS union standing in opposition to it. And by and large, teachers are weak people, they will go along with it. But there are a few who would stand up and say no. And that won't happen because they are few and far between, the teachers who are prepared to stand up at this point. So it's up to parents. It's up to all of us, really, not just parents. I don't have any children in the school system. But I don't need to be worried about it for other people's children. Because when those children become confused and worried and concerned about themselves, that'll be taken home, and it will be the parents that will have to try and deal with it. And that's a likely outcome. As far as I'm concerned, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're a supporter of SNP or not, the sooner these people are removed from power, the better for all of us, especially our children. And don't forget, this is going into primary schools as well. Where are the churches? silent, like the unions, silent. It's up to us, the ordinary people of Inverclyde. If it means taking all the children out of school as a boycott, if you like, then that's what needs to be done. I don't see any other way around it, because nothing's going to change the SNP's mind on this. They're hell bent on doing it. So it's going to take a campaign if the council doesn't have the power to refuse. But you need people on the council to say, no, we don't want this here. We're not having this here. At the moment, there's 6 SNPs on the council, and they're obviously hoping to improve that. In my ward, in Ward 4, they're hoping to double their number to 2. There's 1 already, and now they're hoping to double it. So I'm asking you to consider, if you can't give me your first vote, give me your second vote. Because we have that single transfer system in our elections. So if you must support another party for whatever reasons, I'm asking you to consider giving the Pensioners Party and myself, who represents the Pensioners Party at the moment, on these elections, your second vote. If I were on the council, it might be possible then to form an alliance with the independents and perhaps some of the 1 or 2 Labour people, or the few Conservatives that are there. If we have the power to say, no, we're not going to implement it, or we're going to stall it. But as I say, I don't have that information. I would easily get it if I were voted as a councillor. And I would definitely look into that. Is it possible to stop it at this level? And we have to stop it. Somehow we have to stop this going through. We have to interrupt it and show them in Edinburgh, Sturgeon and our company, that we are not having it. We don't want it. Personally speaking, I think sexual education should be done in the home by the parents, as should religious teachings. As an academic subject, religion can be taught in schools and colleges and universities. Of course it can, as an academic subject. But religious theology should be something for the home. That's my personal view on it. Now, some of these lessons you cannot take your child out. The sex education that's done through the science departments are compulsory, but that's okay, that's fair enough, that's going through the science departments. So it's much more a clinical, biological approach there. But for small children, this is unacceptable. And I would say it's unacceptable also for secondary school. But that's my personal view. And it is, of course, a policy of the Pensioners' Party that we will oppose this kind of so-called education wherever we meet it, whether it's in Scotland, England or Wales. It is, if you are not aware of it, it is pure communism. It's all about destroying families. And it has to be opposed. It's bad for children. And you don't have to accept my word for it. If you use the internet and YouTube, you can find plenty of material from people who have allowed themselves or encouraged to go through all of this stuff. And you will find out very quickly how miserable and regretful they are because they did these things to themselves. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, there are only male and female. That's it. And you cannot change from one to other. You end up destroying the body that you were given at birth. And you live a life of complete regret. And don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. I've done it. I've checked it out. As I say, this is coming. The SNP won't talk about that on the doorstep if they come to your doorstep. Whether they do or not is another matter. Probably not. The last time anyone came to my door, the minute I mentioned anything that wasn't on their play sheet, I kid you not, they ran down the path away from me. They wouldn't answer my questions because they didn't have answers. They were simply expecting me not to know. Now, I'm putting this up because this is the flyer, if you like, the advert for the party and myself for the election on the 5th of May. Now, as I said, we are a small party, and at the moment 50% of the local members are unfit to help deliver these flyers, which is a slight handicap. So you may not get one through your door. It'll depend on where you actually live. But I can't guarantee that you'll get one, because I say at the moment, yeah, 50% of our local membership are incapacitated for one good reason or another. But should you get one, it will be this one. That's just an introduction to the party and what the three main points that I'm standing on are: I want the charges for uplifting unwanted household goods I want that completely removed. Or, at the very best, a compromise would be for the cost to be greatly, greatly reduced. Now, the counter-argument to that is, well, but there's plenty of private men with vans that will do this. Yes, that's true. But they are equally expensive. You need money. You don't have to wait the way you do with the council. And again, that's something that I would be able to look into. If I were a councillor, why does it take so long? Even if you have the money and are able to pay the charge, why does it take so long for it to happen? You will see that on the flyer. You will also see that I'm opposed completely to the charge for the garden refuge collection. What we have here, the brown bin. I'm told it's over £30 at the moment. It will go up, folks. It will go up. Guaranteed. It will rise and continue to rise. Now, we are already paying for collection of rubbish from the houses via the council tax. This is an addition. That's an additional tax. That's two additional taxes you've got. One for household collections, you know, 3-piece suites and chairs and the likes, and beds that are needing replaced. All that sort of stuff that happens to all of us. These are extra charges. These are extra taxes. So that Sturgeon and company can stand in Edinburgh and claim that they have held council taxes down. Yeah, well, of course they have, but they put them up elsewhere. Quietly. Through the councils, through control of the councils. With support by the Green Party. The Green Party is more or less in the pocket of the SNP at this point. And the last one, which is the most insidious of all, of course, is the one that very few people know about, and that is the tax on gravestones. Whereby, if you want if you have to bury someone in an existing grave and you want that person's name and some details about them on the stone that already exists, you pay your stonemason the charge, whatever that might be. Fair enough. But then the council want £150 on top of it. They make the stonemason collect it for them. You have to pay the stonemason his fee plus £150. Again, it's a hidden tax on the dead. It's also an intrusion and an erosion as well of the concept of private property. Again, that's very communistic. I'm sure you've all heard the war cry of late, you know, you will own nothing, but you will be happy. Well, it would appear that you don't even own the gravestone that your mum and dad or your wife or husband or whoever is in. You don't even own it. Because the council have wedged themselves in there. And this started years ago at £30 it was. Now it's £150. It was that last year. I expect it to rise. And none of that will ever change until you stop voting the same people in and give others a chance to say, no, we've had enough, we're taking no more of this. So again, I would urge you, when the 5th of May comes round, if you must vote for a so-called mainstream party, so be it, but at least consider the pensioners' party for your second vote. So whatever you would vote for, and then it would be 2 for the pensioners' party and whoever else is standing in your ward. If you can't give me that first vote in Ward 4, give me the second vote. That quite often is enough to get you elected, depending on how many votes are cast. It's a complicated system, I know, but it does offer the opportunity of others being elected. All these other parties have got lots of people that help, but when you're starting out, obviously you're limited to how much you can spend and how many people can help. And it just so happens at this point in time we've got a couple of members who are genuinely incapacitated. So I'm going to finish at that, ladies and gentlemen. And I thank you for your attention and your attendance. And I'll give you one more view of that flyer. So you may or may not get one. It depends on how we can organise ourselves to get as many out. So for the moment, I will say thanks again for your attention and your attention. And thank those in the chat for showing up. I appreciate it. I'll finish with Sensum's comment. Sensum says, thank you again, John. Common sense will win in the end. And I know he's right. So enjoy the music, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and let's hope the rain doesn't come too much. And I will see you next Sunday at 2 o'clock. So bye for now.
Silently the snow falls, paints a winter scene, swiftly spreads the dark rim, hides a fading autumn green. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, conjure friendships dear to me. Lightly now the breeze flows, disturbing more than just the leaves. But life is much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. Patiently the love grows, lifts the weary heart. Gently now she holds me, melts two worlds once apart. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, usher dreams of you and me. Softly then the breeze blows, disturbing more than just the trees. But love's much more than we can know. We are one small globe in the eternal flow. Melodies of long ago, songs of innocence, harmonies to soothe the soul, have some consequence. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, awakening joys of you and me. Silently the snow falls, bringing winter symphony. But we're much more than we can know. We are one small globe in the eternal flow. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small globe in the eternal flow.